I would never have thought that this could happen to me. Don't repeat my mistakes. It was one of those damp, gray Saturdays that hang heavy in the air like forgotten laundry. The kind of day that soaks through your skin and makes your bones ache, no matter how many cups of coffee you've had. My husband, Tom, had just wrapped up one of his neighborhood barbecue parties, a semi-regular tradition that always left our house smelling of smoke, coated in grease and peppered with beer bottles in corners I didn't even know existed. He had gone off with a few of the guys to catch the second half of the game at Doug's place. I hadn't planned on tagging along. My head already buzzed from the background noise of hours of small talk, and my feet hurt from playing hostess. So I waved him off with a lazy flick of my wrist, already eyeing the mountain of dishes in the sink and the red Solo cups gathering like weeds on our porch. That's when Greg, his friend, appeared in the doorway with a trash bag in one hand and a half smile on his face. "Need a hand?" he asked, shifting the bag to his other hand like he was settling in for a job interview, not cleanup duty. I blinked, momentarily surprised. Greg was always polite, but I wouldn't have called us close. He was Tom's work friend, someone who came to our gatherings and knew how to make people laugh without ever saying too much. A little quieter than the rest, a little more observant. He had these eyes, soft gray with flecks of green, that gave you the feeling he saw more than he let on. "You really don't have to," I said, gesturing vaguely to the chaos. "This is my battlefield." He shrugged. "I've got nowhere to be for a while. Besides, I think you deserve some backup." I didn't argue. I was too tired to, and there was something nice about not being alone in the aftermath. So we started cleaning. At first, it was quiet. Just the rustle of plastic bags, the clink of bottles, the low drone of distant sports commentary leaking. Through an open window. We moved around each other easily, as if some unspoken choreography guided us. He took the kitchen while I attacked the porch. At one point, I caught him rinsing out the blender that Tom had left caked in dried margarita mix. Most men wouldn't have touched that thing with gloves on. "You ever think Tom throws these parties just to get out of the cleanup?" Greg said over the rush of water. ISM or TED. If he could outsource breathing, he probably would. Greg chuckled, and for a moment I saw something soften in his posture, like maybe he understood more about my life than I realized. As we worked, the air shifted, not dramatically, nothing you could point to. Just an awareness. I noticed the way Greg's sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, how his forearms were dusted with dark hair, and how his fingers moved with a kind of quiet precision. He noticed the way I rubbed my neck when I was tired and asked if I wanted some water. He noticed a lot, actually. At some point, we ended up in the living room together. I was gathering stray napkins and coasters. He was wiping down the coffee table. We both reached for the same half-full glass at once, and our hands brushed. A flash of warmth, like a live wire, zipped up my arm. We both pulled back slightly and then looked at each other. There it was, subtle, tentative, but undeniable. The flicker of something unsaid. I swallowed. "You don't have to stay, Greg. I mean, really, it's fine." He didn't move. "I don't mind." I was suddenly aware of the way my t-shirt clung to my back, of how long it had been since someone looked at me. Like I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's hostess, someone's background character. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded, but it came out like a question. "Yeah, just tired." "You ever get tired and not even know why?" "All the time." I laughed softly. A strange laugh, not from humor but from something else. Relief, maybe? Recognition. He sat down on the edge of the couch and patted the space beside him. It was casual, friendly, but I hesitated. "I won't bite," he added. I sat slowly. A respectable distance between us, but still close enough to feel his presence. We were both quiet. for a while, watching the way the shadows from the kitchen lights spilled across the floor. You and Tom, he said, careful with his words, you seem good together. Most of the time. That's generous. I smiled, but it didn't quite reach my eyes. We're comfortable. You know how that goes? I do. And just like that, something shifted again. Knock. In a dangerous way. In a human way. A way that made me feel seen. Not just looked at, heard. Not just nodded at. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the silence, or the wine I had with dinner. Or the way he was looking at me, not with hunger, but with this open, patient kind of curiosity that I hadn't felt in years. Greg, I said softly, why did you really stay? He hesitated. Then, because you seemed like you needed someone too. I turned to him, my breath catching just a little. That's simple. Yeah, he said. Sometimes things are. We didn't touch again that night. Not really. Just a moment where he reached over, gently brushed a stray hair from my face, and let his hand linger for a second too long. I should have pulled away. I didn't. The clock ticked somewhere behind us. A dog barked in the distance. I stood eventually, thanking him again, feeling strangely exposed. Like something sacred had happened, even though nothing happened.
He left without saying more than a quiet, "Good night, Rachel."
But the way he said, it made me feel like something had cracked open inside me, and that was just the beginning. The next morning, the house was clean, and everything looked ordinary. But I wasn't. I moved through the day as if everything were normal. Folding laundry, checking my email, pouring coffee, but my mind wandered constantly back to Greg, the way he listened. The way his presence lingered like a low hum under my skin. I'd never noticed that hum before, or maybe I had and I ignored it, because noticing it felt like opening a door I wasn't supposed to. Tom came home late from work the next evening, muttering something about traffic and budget meetings. He kissed me on the cheek without really looking at me. I smiled, the way I always did. But that night, as I lay in bed beside him, I couldn't stop thinking about that brief, electric moment in the living room. The look in Greg's eyes, the way it felt to be seen, and I wondered if something had shifted permanently. If what happened or didn't happen was going to stay between us, unspoken, but not forgotten. I didn't know then how much more was coming, but I would learn. The days that followed felt like the slow unraveling of a tightly wound thread. I tried to forget it, I really did. That quiet moment with Greg, the warmth of his presence. The way his eyes rested on mine without expectations or demands. But it clung to me, hovering just out of reach. Like the memory of a melody you can't name but hum anyway. Tom was his usual self. Distracted, preoccupied, buried in work and routine. We fell back into our rhythm without hiccups. The morning coffee. The evening television. The shared silence in bed that had become more a truce than a bond. And yet, I was different. I noticed things more. The sound of my own breath in the shower. The way my hands moved when I washed dishes. The growing space inside me that felt hollow. Echoing. It was 3 days later when Greg texted. Asterisk, asterisk, hey. Hope I didn't overstep by staying the other night. Just wanted to say it was good to talk. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at the message longer than I should have. It was harmless, friendly, but my pulse jumped. Asterisk, asterisk, no. Not at all. Asterisk, asterisk. I wrote back. Asterisk, asterisk. It was nice having someone around who actually notices the mess. Asterisk, asterisk. There was a pause, long enough that I started to question whether I should have sent it. Then his reply lit up the screen. Asterisk, asterisk. Notice a lot more than that. Asterisk, asterisk. My breath caught just slightly, and there it was again. That sensation of standing on the edge of something. Something that could break me open or bring me back to life. I didn't respond. Not right away. Instead, I closed my phone and set it face down on the counter. I went about my evening as if everything were normal. Cooked dinner, folded towels, watched Jeopardy with Tom, who didn't even glance at me when I answered 3 questions correctly in a row. That night, I dreamed of soft gray eyes and the weight of silence that didn't feel empty. The next time I saw Greg, it was almost accidental, or so I told myself. Tom had invited him to help fix the fence along the back of our yard, a chore that had been postponed through 2 winters and a windstorm. I didn't know he was coming until I saw him through the kitchen window, tools in hand, laughing at something Tom had said. He looked good, simple jeans, faded flannel rolled to his elbows. His hair was tousled and his hands were already dusty from the work. He looked up at the window and caught my gaze before I could look away, and he smiled. Later, while the men took a break on the porch, I brought out lemonade. It was automatic, polite, but when I handed Greg his glass, our fingers touched again. Only this time, it didn't feel accidental. His eyes met mine. Steady, searching. "Thanks," he said, his voice low. Tom groaned as he stood. "Back to it. This fence won't build itself." Greg glanced at me for just a second longer than necessary before following. That evening, after the tools were put away and Tom had fallen asleep in front of the TV, I found myself on the back porch alone. The air was heavy with honeysuckle and cut grass. The fence looked good. Sturdy, clean lines, like something meaningful had been done. My phone buzzed. Asterisk, you looked beautiful today. Even covered in flour. Asterisk, I blinked. Flour? And then I remembered while they were outside, I had been baking banana bread, trying to stay busy. I had flour on my shirt and didn't care enough to brush it off. He noticed that. I stared at the message, unsure what to say. Every part of me wanted to lean into the warmth of his words, to admit how deeply they touched something in me I thought had been buried. But I also felt guilty. Not guilty like I'd done something wrong, nothing had happened. But guilty in that aching, unshakable way of knowing your heart has wandered somewhere it shouldn't. That night, I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I wasn't young anymore. The lines around my eyes had deepened. My skin had lost some of its shine. My hair had streaks of silver that I no longer bothered to hide. But for the first time in years, I looked closely. There was still something in me. Something that wanted. I thought about Greg's message and something inside me flickered to life. Over the next week, we messaged a few more times. Always carefully. Thoughtfully, he never pushed, never crossed a line. And yet, the words carried a weight that echoed louder than any touch. One afternoon, when Tom had taken a weekend trip to visit his brother out of state, I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the quiet. The house felt enormous and empty. I wandered from room to room, touching things without purpose. A face, the worn arm of the couch. A picture of me and Tom from 15 years ago, smiling stiffly at some resort we barely remember. I picked up my phone. Asterisk, the house is too quiet. Asterisk. He replied almost immediately. Asterisk, want some company? Asterisk, it took me a long time to answer. But I did. 20 minutes later, he was standing at my door. He didn't come inside right away. Just stood there, hands in his pockets, waiting for some unspoken permission. I stepped aside, my heart thudding. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, talking about things that didn't matter. Movies, music, old family stories, but beneath the words, something hummed between us. Something honest and kind and unbearably close. "I'm not trying to make anything complicated," he said softly, his gaze steady. "I just like being around you. You feel real." I swallowed hard. I don't remember the last time someone said that to me.
He reached out, gently brushing his knuckles against the back of my hand.
A featherlight touched. My fingers curled, not away from his, but toward. I don't know what this is, I whispered. You don't have to know. We stayed like that, hands barely touching, breath held, hearts wide open, for what felt like hours. And when he finally stood to leave, he didn't lean in, didn't kiss me. Just squeezed my hand and said, "Good night, Rachel." And once again, it was the not happening that felt like everything. When he left, I didn't feel guilty. I felt alive, and that terrified me. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The sheets beside me were cold, untouched. Tom wouldn't be home until late that evening, and the house was wrapped in that particular stillness that only comes with solitude, thick, hushed, almost reverent. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, staring at the floor, wondering when exactly the rules had changed. When a man like Greg, quiet, observant, kind, had begun to take up more space in my mind than my own husband, there had been no affair, no betrayal in the physical sense. But something had shifted. A thread had come loose in the fabric of my life, and I had tugged on it without even realizing. And now everything felt slightly askew, like a painting hung just a little off-center. I busied myself through the morning, laundry, vacuuming, reorganizing the spice rack. Anything to keep my hands moving, but Greg stayed in my thoughts like a whisper I couldn't quiet. I kept replaying the moment his fingers brushed mine. The way his eyes lingered, not with desire, but understanding. I didn't know whether I wanted more of him or more of myself. Maybe both. Around noon, my phone buzzed, asterisk, asterisk, thinking about you, hope today's kind to you. Asterisk, asterisk, dot it. Was such a small message. Simple, no demands, but it pierced through the stillness like a chime in a quiet room. I stared at it, rereading the words, feeling the familiar flutter low in my chest. I didn't reply right away. I went out into the garden instead, somewhere Tom rarely spent any time. It had become mine over the years, my little patch of peace. Even if most of the flowers were past bloom, I sat on the bench under the old oak tree, foam in hand, heart thudding. Asterisk, asterisk, thinking about you too. Asterisk, asterisk, I finally wrote, asterisk, asterisk. Wish I understood what this is. Asterisk, asterisk, a moment later. Asterisk, asterisk, maybe you don't have to understand it. Maybe it is asterisk, asterisk, and somehow that settled something in me. The next time we saw each other, it was after Tom had returned. Things between Greg and me had grown quieter again, less messaging, more space. We hadn't said anything about seeing each other, but I knew eventually it would happen. Our town wasn't big, and our circles overlapped more than I cared to admit. It was a week later at another neighbor's cookout. Greg arrived late. I saw him before he saw me, standing at the edge of the lawn, holding a drink, laughing politely at something someone said. But as soon as he glanced toward the patio where I stood, his eyes found mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. And again, that hush fell over everything. We didn't speak right away, not with people around. Not with Tom nearby, distracted by the grill and a half-empty beer. But Greg found his way near me eventually, passing by with a plate of food, standing beside me as we both watched someone's kid try to catch fireflies. I wasn't sure I'd see you here, he said under his breath. I smiled, not looking at him. Same. His voice was so low no one could have heard, not even 2 feet away. I've missed our conversations. So have I. It wasn't a confession? Not quite. But it felt like one. A truth suspended in midair. Later that evening, as dusk fell and the party began to dissolve, I went to the side of the house to get away from the noise for a moment. I needed air, quiet, a place to breathe. I didn't expect Greg to follow. He stepped out from the corner like he'd known I'd be there. I just needed a break, I said quickly, trying to sound casual. He nodded. Me too. There was a pause. You look distracted tonight, he said. I turned to face him. It's hard not to be. The cicadas buzzed somewhere in the distance. A soft breeze rustled the leaves above us. I don't want to make your life complicated. He said, you need to know that. I know, but I can't pretend you're just someone's wife to me anymore. My breath caught. I don't even know what I am right now, I whispered. I feel like I'm waking up after being asleep for years. He stepped closer, still careful, still respectful. Then maybe you just need to take your time waking up. No rush, no expectations. Just honesty. And then, in the quiet of that evening, he reached out and gently took my hand, not possessively, not even romantically, just as a tether, a promise. I didn't pull away. For a long while, we stood like that, side by side, not saying a word. And it felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in years. That night, I didn't sleep much. Tom snored softly beside me, unaware. My mind was alive, racing with questions and possibilities. I knew I was standing on a fault line, that one wrong step could break everything open. But I also knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. Not fully. Greg had awakened something in me. Not just desire, but presence, attention. Care. And the more I tried to deny it, the more I felt like I was denying the parts of myself I had forgotten even existed. The next day, I wrote in a notebook I hadn't touched in years, just thoughts, ideas, things I hadn't said out loud. I wrote about how I felt when Greg looked at me, how I used to feel when Tom and I first dated, how things had changed so slowly I didn't even notice until I was empty. It felt good to write, like reclaiming something. A few days later, I ran into Greg at the hardware store. It should have been nothing. We passed each other in the paint aisle, but the look he gave me, soft, open, understanding, made my heart ache in that sweet, unbearable way again. I've been thinking about you, he said. I glanced around. This isn't the place. He smiled. Then let's find one that is. I hesitated, heart pounding. What do you mean? Just a walk. Somewhere quiet. No expectations. I looked at him for a long time. And then I nodded. And just like that, something that had been held at bay quietly stepped into the light. We met at the old walking trail just outside of town, where the trees leaned over the path like they were listening. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, just joggers and bird watchers, people with earbuds and dogs, minds elsewhere. I parked a little farther from the entrance than usual, like distance would grant me clarity. Greg was already there, leaning against his truck, arms crossed over his chest. When he saw me, he didn't smile right away. He waited, watching me approach, like I was something fragile and important. You sure about this?
He asked softly. No, I said, but I'm here.
That was enough. We started walking slowly, our footsteps crunching against gravel and the occasional crackle of dry leaves. The woods were quiet, wrapped in a kind of late afternoon gold that made everything feel hushed and sacred. For a while, we didn't speak, just moved beside each other, sharing space the way people do when words might ruin the moment. I could feel the warmth of him just inches from my skin, not touching, but close enough to sense. It was strange how that silence, that restraint, could feel more intimate than anything I'd known in years. Finally, he said, I've been thinking a lot about that night, the way you looked at me. I glanced at him, my breath hitching. I wasn't trying to send a message, I said. You didn't have to. It was just honest. We walked another few steps. I don't know what I'm doing, I admitted. Tom and we've been coasting for years. I didn't even realize how far apart we drifted until someone looked at me and actually saw me. He stopped walking then, turned to me. I see you, Rachel. His voice cracked slightly, like it cost him something to say. I felt a burn in my throat, something tight and hot rising behind my eyes. I blinked it away. Greg, I can't give you promises. I can't walk away from a marriage just because I feel something unexpected. I'm not asking you to. His voice was steady, sure. I'm not here to take something from you. I care about you. And I want you to feel like you have a choice in your own life. That's all. A breeze picked up, sending a ripple through the trees. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the sun. You make me feel alive again, I whispered. And that's terrifying. He stepped closer, slowly. His hand found mine, gently lacing our fingers together. I don't want to be a secret, he said. And I won't push you to be someone you're not. But if there's something between us, and I think we both know there is, I'm willing to wait. As long as it takes. Or until you tell me there's nothing here. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let myself feel the weight of his hand, the warmth of it grounding me. I looked up at him and saw not just a man, but a question, a possibility. A mirror. Eventually, I said, I need time. Then take it, he said. I'll still be here. We walked again, slower this time, side by side. Sometimes his fingers brushed mine. Sometimes they didn't. And that night, when we said goodbye by the side of the trail, he didn't kiss me. He just looked at me like I was someone worth waiting for. I drove home with the windows down, the air cool against my face. The house was quiet when I got there. Tom was in the living room, watching something on TV. He looked up when I came in. Hey, he said, casual. You were out for a while. Yeah, I said, hanging up my coat. Went for a walk. He nodded. You okay? I paused. Yeah, I said, and realized it was true, at least partially. For the first time in years, I felt like I was starting to understand what it meant to be okay. Not perfect. Not certain. Just honest. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and my notebook. I wrote for a long time, not just about Greg, but about me. About how easy it is to forget yourself in the routine of marriage.
About
How we become caretakers, schedulers, peacemakers, but rarely women. Rarely full, complicated beings. I didn't write about love. Not yet, but I wrote about clarity. About moments that feel like lanterns in the fog. A week passed. Greg didn't text. I didn't either. It wasn't avoidance. It was space. Necessary hard-earned space. Tom and I had dinner one night, just the two of us. No distractions. I looked at him closely for the first time in a long time. He looked older. Worn down, not unkind, but absent. Like the life we'd built had become a house we lived in separately. Do you ever feel like we lost something? I asked out of nowhere. He looked up from his plate. Sometimes, he said. But I think that's normal. Things fade. You just keep going. Should we have fought harder? I asked. For what? I didn't answer. I didn't know. Later that night, I stood by the window while Tom brushed his teeth. I looked out at the yard, the garden, the fence Greg had helped build. I thought about hands that healed instead of held. About words that offered instead of took. And I realized something important. It wasn't about choosing between two men. It was about choosing myself. 2 days later, I met Greg for coffee. In public, in daylight, nothing secret, nothing shameful. He saw me walk in and stood. Smiled that same soft, slow smile that had undone me from the beginning. You look better, he said. I feel better, I said. Not fixed. Just more awake. He reached for my hand across the table. I want to go slow, I told him. I need to be sure of everything. I'm not going anywhere. And I believed him. That night, I went home and talked to Tom. Really talked. For the first time in years, we didn't fight. We didn't cry. We just told the truth. And the truth was, we'd become strangers who respected each other. But we didn't love each other anymore. Not in a way that held two people together. Not in a way that healed. We agreed to separate kindly, slowly. With care. It wasn't clean, nothing ever is, but it was honest. Months later, Greg and I stood in my garden under the same oak tree where I'd once felt completely alone. Only this time, he was holding my hand. And I wasn't afraid. This wasn't the life I expected. But it was mine now. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was living it.